I'm Cathy, and I'm an extreme den builder. But I mostly enjoy making magical spaces in classrooms, so classroom dens. So this kit is kind of like the basic kit I would use in a classroom, probably a primary classroom. So yeah, I kind of put all this in bags in my car, and then I turn up, and then I change that whole classroom into whatever world we want it to be in that day. The first thing I have to do is check out the space, because the common denominator in any space, indoor, outdoor, is the floor. In an ideal classroom that would build dens, there'd be hooks everywhere and pulleys, and I can just, black out when I need it, and loads of power. But obviously every classroom's different, so some are really old, which are great sometimes because you have old pipes. Some are brand new and you're not allowed to stick blue tack on the wall, let alone put a den up. So I look at the floor and I look at the furniture that's already in. The main thing is prepping the room, so I get rid of all the chairs, and I usually turn the tables upside down. And what's brilliant about that is it gives us a strong structure to start the den building. Cardboard tubes, and these I get free from fabric stores. They give them out, and they're really strong, but what's great is they can go onto the legs of the table. So suddenly you have this forest in the classroom full of these uprights. I used various sized umbrellas or parasols. You can't be superstitious when you're den building, you just got to do it. What this does, and this is another way, I do all of this without standing on any chairs or steps, is it's really great actually if you've got young people helping you, you've got to get them to work out how you put this in, up and over, if there's a ceiling in the way or you're not tall enough. It's just playing around with angles and sliding that in, and then putting that up and over onto, I'm going to try and do it so you can still see me, onto the table leg. That gives us a canopy. So this canopy world starts to happen really quickly. Then the main thing is, once you've got that structure, is a huge parachute. So the parachutes I use are actually second-hand old army parachutes. The reason why I do that is they're huge. They can do lots of multiple things. So you could make them really, really small. You could cut them in half. You could share them between classrooms. So once I've created that standard world, which is, to recap, tables upside down, cardboard tube on the legs, parasol or umbrella into the tube, and then fabric, which for me is a parachute. Suddenly you could be in a underwater cave, you could be in a pyramid, you could be in a forest, you could be in somebody's pocket. So suddenly that simple way of changing and getting rid of the classroom can happen. What I do then look at is, if within the story, if it's a story that I'm looking at, is there a focal point that might be really good? Does it involve water? Does it involve looking at two groups of people either side? I start to think about the space, and does it allow for everyone to see everything, or is there deliberately little areas to make it into small groups? So I'll do that once I'm building it, to go, actually this group I know I've worked with before, or this group I need to work in small groups, so I will make little chambers within, or I'll make sure it's really big at the beginning so everyone can fit in, but there might be ways of doing it and moving around. So I'll use other pieces of fabric. This is an example of a section of a parachute, and it's white rather than pink. You can get them in different colours. When I design spaces, especially immersive spaces, I like to feel like there's a diagonal, there's a journey you go through, because I feel like people will feel that within that environment. So it might be that I might block an area off, but I'll block it off with things that you can see through or walk through. So children feel like sometimes they're hidden. They like to be in dens where they think they're not being seen, but we know that we might need to see them. So there's ways of doing that where you can put sort of floaty fabric or netting fabric. They'll feel like they're in an intimate space, but you can still see them and they can still see you if they need instructions. So far we've managed to make a den without too much fixing, because we've used the tables as the solid structure base that we know that they're not going to move, they're not going to fall over. But when you're adding extra pieces within the den, it's worth knowing that you've got cable ties as an option. I would avoid sellotape or tape. It's a habit to just tape round. I'm always thinking, how quickly can I pack this away? So always think of the out, same as in theatre. Always think about how you can make it all disappear again as much as you can make it appear. So for fixing, it's thinking about a stitch. A stitch is always going to be better than tape. And pegs are the classic den building, and they're great for children for dexterity, especially the little ones to try out. If we're talking with really little ones, sometimes what's good is these bendy tubes. They're actually for hair, but they're almost like really thick. They've got wire in them, so they're almost like pipe cleaners. And again, when I'm working on things like this, I'm always conscious of those key skills that we want children to do as well, whether it's cutting, sticking, but also tying and fixing. So having the confidence to attach something and know it's going to last more than just a second. I think I've noticed that when children are den building and they get frustrated that it just falls apart again. So having things that they have that satisfaction of turning into a knot or twisting, just those little moments are really special because they understand then, which then can go into DT and stuff. Cable ties are really good, although they're one use, but you can get cable ties on a reel. But I think it's always handy having cable ties that you as adults use if you need to. The other thing I use a lot as well, which is reusable, is Velcro. So once you've got your space, depending on time, but also this is where projects can come in. So over time, some schools have built their own den kits with materials and artifacts and items that you've got in school or you've used in a project. I use a lot of hula hoops in my work because they're a recognised thing that children and teachers know. Also, there might be lots laying around that don't get used much and we can reuse them. And they're really great to create structure and frames if you're building a den outdoors. So the lighting goes in last. You don't have to use lighting, but I think that always comes back in feedback, is that makes a big difference to working in immersive space or creating a wonder classroom. And you can use a lot of lighting without the den, but what starts to happen is it just changes your senses, changes the atmosphere if you take off those big lights that you use every day in school, in classrooms. A good, safe extension cable, and I use a rug. If I have to cross an area that I think people might walk across, I'll put a rug across the cable. I always make sure there's an area backstage, an area that the children don't go to where all the plugs go from. Or ideally, I use lights that don't have any wires. These kind of things you can get in, supermarkets and regular shops. You can order them, but what's great about them is you can change atmosphere just by planting them under fabric and hiding them, so there's a sense of atmosphere, but not necessarily about just seeing bright lights. It might just be that a corner where you've got white fabric is just a waterfall because you put lots of blue lights that are moving on. And what's exciting when you're storytelling as well is that you could change the colours as it's working, or you could give that job to a group of children, and that sort of gets them engaged in what's happening. These ones are always really good. They're a spotlight that you can clip, but they're really strong. They're really robust. They last for a long time. They don't get hot. And I've just put some cellophane on, so it will give me a lovely yellow glow, or I can change that around. You could also colour it in with Sharpies. That changes the colour. So there's just various lights, like twinkly lights you'd get on a Christmas tree. Again, I would not be afraid to do something different with them. So if you get lights and you're used to having a light that you would garland across, it feels a bit Christmassy. But if your lights are in a lump and there's a bit of fabric over the top, then suddenly it's a special place that tells stories, or it's a glowing fire, or it's that kind of thing. So think differently every time you use these materials, so it's not always what you imagine. It then shows the children that you can do things differently with everything that you get. Always used to having batteries. That's going to be the thing that's in this kit so far, is the thing that, is this, and cable ties, I guess, is what I have to top up on. And there might be special lights. This one lights up. So it might be, as a whole school, you might all have a couple of nice things that you think you can use to put in the kit and to look after. The other thing that I use, if I'm traveling around and I'm not using the tech that's in the classroom, is a speaker that I link to my phone or my iPad. And I use, if I've got time, I really love using projection. This is actually a projector that's this big, the size of a phone. You'll all have projectors in schools, so it's great to think about not always having them up facing, but if you have them low and they're facing up against a white or a parachute, you can have video moving, and that again changes that whole atmosphere. You can also put children's photos on if there's a project, so their artwork is part of the den. So that's really exciting when you can really start to multi-layer the use of a den that could stay for a couple of days. I also always take with me things that are like magical. So it could be that there's a light inside this. So again, for storytelling, once you've created your world and you've added the texture, the lights, you might have artifacts that are revealed. So again, things like suitcases, boxes, they all help to tell stories. What isn't here but I do use is smells. People remember if they've walked into their space that used to be their classroom, smell really has an impact. So I usually spray something, or there's oils, or I've peeled an orange and tucked it under a rug. So again, it's like trying to hit as many senses as possible. So that's the basic kit that I use. It can be put up really quickly, or you can take your time and it's in a corner of a space, or you might, as a school, create a space that works for a whole week that you all tap into. So hopefully that's the basic kit. You can see how it starts.